Like and subscribe for endless entertainment.
Our story starts off with Naofumi waking up in his room. He decides to go on a walk and finds himself in a library. He randomly picks up a book that tells the story of 4 heroes who defeated monsters. The book begins to glow and suddenly kidnaps him to another world. He gets up and finds the culprits explaining that they kidnapped them so they can risk their lives to protect their kingdom. The other heroes refuses and asks to be sent home unless all their needs are met. So the kidnappers decides to take them to the king. In the throne room, the kidnapping king asks them to introduce themselves. So the bow, spear, and sword hero speaks up, but he blows off Naofumi and starts ignoring him. The king explains that there are portals that appear in this world that spawns monsters to give out free tickets to heaven. So they need the 4 mighty heroes to fight back against them and save the world. Naofumi notices that he has a status window and realizes that they're weak as elf. They decide to form parties, so the king tells them to give him a day to assemble the strongest in his kingdom. In the night, the 4 hostages begin talking and realizes that all of them are from different versions of Japan, and reveals that they have played a game similar to this world, but Naofumi, who is clueless. They tell him that the shield class is for beta males, so he begins to freak out. But he decides that although he won't be strong, he will use his powers to protect his party and make them strong instead. The next day, the heroes enter the throne room and see many people lined up to join their party. They begin to select the heroes they want to team up with, but no one chooses Naofumi. He asks the other heroes to give him some people. So Mine raises her hands and decides to join Naofumi on his journey. The king hands out money to all the heroes, then sends his victims away to begin their journey to get stronger until the wave of monsters begins. Mine shows Naofumi around the town and decides to get him some equipment. She brings him to a shop where the shopkeeper realizes that he's the shield hero and greets him. He shows them some swords, but when Naofumi tries to touch them, he gets punished. He realizes that he can only equip and use shields to fight. So Mine recommends that he buys armor instead. They head to the training grounds, where Naofumi begins massacring the friendly creatures going about their day. He feeds their remains to his shield to help it evolve, then heads back to the weapon shop to buy some equipment for Mine. She takes out a handful of the most expensive items, but he doesn't want to spend the bread, so she gives him a little motivation, and he ends up becoming her sugar daddy. They go out for lunch where she tries to toast to their success, but Naofumi doesn't drink. She tries to convince him again, but our MC isn't a simp. He decides to go to bed and thanks her for joining his party, but she doesn't mind and wishes him good night. He begins to budget all his bread and stash some inside his shield before laying down and drifting off to dreamland. Naofumi awakens but realizes that everything he had has been stolen. So he rushes outside and goes over to Mine's room. He sees knights and tries to explain what happened, but they kidnap him once more and brings him to the throne room. Naofumi sees everyone waiting for him inside and tries to explain, but he's silenced by the king. Mine explains that last night Naofumi entered her room while being drunk and tried to force himself on her, but she escaped and found the spear hero for protection. Naofumi realizes that the spear is wearing his equipment and asks for proof of his crime. So a knight steps up with Mine's torn clothes. Naofumi is confused as why she's doing this to him, but he realizes that the witch was just pretending to be kind so she could steal all his stuff and give it to the spear. The other heroes begin scolding him for being a scumbag, as he notices that ever since he was summoned he was looked down on for being the shield hero. He decides that he won't lift a finger to help this world and asks to be sent back home. But the king reveals that they can't summon another hero until they all meet their end, and the only way to return home is to defeat all the waves of monsters, so he decides not to imprison the hero. Naofumi throws his remaining coins at the lying bitch's feet and walks away with no money, equipment, and trust from the kingdom. He walks through the capital with everyone avoiding him. The shopkeeper calls him over to fist his face, but he sees something in Naofumi's eyes and decides to give him equipment instead. He walks outside and takes out all his anger on all the poor defenseless creatures who enter his path. He goes back to the town and tries to sell all the remains in exchange for money, but the merchant tries to rip him off, so he persuades the shopkeeper into giving him a fair price. He pays back the shopkeeper and heads into the forest to sleep. While experimenting, he realizes that he can feed his shield items to gain new abilities. He sells the plants he made and goes to have some lunch. 3 men shows up and offers to become his party members, so he follows them down a totally not suspicious alleyway. They try to rob him, so he throws monsters at them and parry their blow. Naofumi reveals that he can't farm monsters because he has no offensive abilities. A shady MF suddenly shows up and offer him something special. So he follows the trader to a circus and goes inside to see many workers that don't get paid. He reveals that these workers are under a curse that sends them to a better place if they betray their master. Naofumi seems interested and looks around for a new party member. He hears coughing and goes over to see a furry inside a cage. The trader tells him that she's on heaven's doorstep, but Naofumi decides that he will take her. He gives him his fluid, then the trader marks her with it to form a contract between them. He goes over to Raphtalia and gently lifts her outside of the trader's shop and brings her over to the shopkeeper so she can get some equipment to fight monsters. He commands her to attack the animal and realizes that he also gets XP from her wins. He leaves the shop and brings her to a restaurant. The food arrives and Raphtalia finds it delicious, but Naofumi says that he can't taste anything since he was accused. They go out and begin to farm XP, but they take a break so Naofumi can give Raphtalia some medicine to try and cure her. In the night, she wakes up screaming because of a nightmare, so he hugs her until she calms down. Naofumi takes her to an inn and begins to take care of her like she was his daughter. But while they're farming XP, they encounter a cute rabbit. He tells her to off it, but she refuses because she's scared of blood. Naofumi says he needs her to be his sword, so she grows a pair and sends it to meet Rabbit Jesus. They travel to a new village where Naofumi asks about the best way to make money. He finds out about a mine filled with materials, but there are many dangerous monsters surrounding it. They enter the mine and find a cave filled with gems. Naofumi begins digging, but Raphtalia sees a monster incoming and begins to have a panic attack. He takes her for a swim in the lake and she reveals that a dog monster similar to that made her an orphan. He tells her that they're gonna take down that monster and rushes towards him, but he gets injured. He tells her to poke holes in it, but she refuses, so he tells her to run away instead. She realizes that if she leaves him, he's going to meet her parents. So she grows another pair and goes for an air takedown. Naofumi hits it with an air shield, so she takes the chance to see if all dogs go to heaven. She runs to him while crying and makes him promise to never leave her alone. A week passes. Naofumi reveals that he gained many new skills as a monster suddenly runs towards him, so he traps it and makes Raphtalia cut it down. He returns to the shopkeeper where it's shown that Naofumi still sees Raphtalia as a child. He asks for new equipment for her, but she asks for new armor for him since he keeps getting hurt. Naofumi gets some new drip and decides to go to the church to see when the wave will appear and realizes that he only has a day left. The spear hero arrives behind him. He decides to leave the church, but sees the other heroes. The spear begins flirting with Raphtalia, but she says that she is Naofumi's sword. He grabs her and begins walking away while the other heroes talk down to him. He goes home where Raphtalia asks him what went wrong with the other heroes, but he refuses to tell her because no one ever believes him. The next day, everyone gathers in town. Raphtalia goes to Naofumi and tells him that she is thankful for everything that he has done for her and promises to always be by his side. The timer on the wave drops to 0, so Naofumi and Raphtalia gets kidnapped to where the wave begins to appear. He sees the other heroes running towards it, but notices that a nearby village is being wiped out, so they go over to protect the citizens from the monster. Naofumi gets the attention of all the monsters to lead them away from the citizens while Raphtalia evacuates them from danger. He runs towards a watchtower and climbs up to ring the bell. The tower gets gangbanged by all the monsters, so he decides to burn it down to give them a one-way ticket straight to hell. The citizens decide that they're not gonna run away but help defend their homes with him. A giant zombie arrives to attack, but he blocks it. Then Raphtalia comes in to perform a team ultimate. Naofumi tells the citizens to help evacuate while they fight the monsters, but a powerful magic attack comes from the sky to burn everything around it. The knights appear, so Raphtalia attacks them for endangering Naofumi. He tells her to stand down because the zombies are gonna smoke them, but he blocks its attack so Raphtalia can take it down. She begins slaughtering all that stands before her, which inspires the knights to also launch an attack to protect the city. The other 3 heroes defeats the boss of the wave, which makes it disappear. The villagers begins to mourn all that they have lost and thank Naofumi for all that he has done to keep them safe, but he says it was nothing. Naofumi tells Raphtalia that they did well today and gives her a good girl pat. The king has a celebration for all the heroes, so Naofumi attends to collect the reward money. The spear sees Raphtalia and heads towards her, but Mine grabs him and whispers something into his ear. The spear goes over and challenges our Naofumi to a fight because he made Raphtalia his slave, so he decides to leave, but the king commands him to accept the challenge or they will take Raphtalia away from him by force. He prepares for the fight but can't wield a weapon. He walks into the battlefield to face the spear. He charges at Naofumi, but all his attacks gets blocked. The spear uses a skill that hurts him, but he gets up and runs forward, delivering a fisting so his monsters can have a taste. But he slays the monsters and goes in for a strike, but the shield counters the blow. Naofumi summons a shield to push him back, then imprison the spear with monsters that attack him. He lets out the spear and tells him to surrender, but he gets blown away by magic and sees Mine on the battlefield. The spear suddenly rushes at him and lands a blow that manages to put down Naofumi. The spear is declared the winner, but Naofumi steps up and pointed out that Mine helped him in the fight. But everyone remains silent, so the king congratulates the spear. Mine comes over to gloat over him, then it's revealed that she is the king's daughter. Naofumi realizes that everything was a setup from the very beginning and wonders why everyone's against him. They bring Raphtalia forwards and uses magic to undo the contract with Naofumi, then she turns and leave. He tries to throw away the shield, but it returns to him, so he decides that this world should be destroyed. Raphtalia slaps the spear and explains that Naofumi has been nothing but good to her because they are a team, and reveals that he saved her from rotting away in a cage and passing. The other heroes arrive and tells the spear that he lost the fight because Mine intervened and the king commanded the audience to remain quiet. Raphtalia goes over to Naofumi. He tells her to leave and stay away from him because he's a loser, but Raphtalia says that she thinks he's innocent of everything they accuse him of, but he doesn't believe her and tries to rip off the shield. She places her hands on it and begins reminding him of all the people that he saved using the shield and embrace him in a hug to remind him that she is still his sword. He finally sees her as an adult and questions when she grew up, while he leaks man juice as she continues to embrace him until he falls asleep. He awakens on heaven and goes on the roof to have some lunch. He bites into the food and realizes that he can now taste it. They head towards the throne room and accepts their rewards, but they tell Naofumi that his reward was freeing Raphtalia. The bow and sword heroes says that it's unfair for him not to get paid because Mine cheated in the match and he also defended a village from complete annihilation. So the king allows him to get the minimum paid allowed. They go to the trader's tent where Raphtalia decided to have her contract restored. The trader tells them about eggs that birth Chocobo with a chance to get a dragon. Naofumi buys one and heads towards the medicine shop. He gives Naofumi a book because he saved his relatives in the village and is sent to the magic shop, who gives him a magic book because her grandson was also saved in the village. He heads towards the village to have a nap but awakens to find that the egg is about to hatch. Philo jumps on his head and imprints on him. They take her out to eat and she grows until she's big enough to ride, but Philo can't control their speed and crashes through everything. The villagers gather as Mine reveals that the spear now rules the village and is placing heavy taxes on them. Naofumi speaks up and says that she's tweaking. The villagers agree, so Mine scolds them, but the secret services comes in and gives her a scroll. Mine challenges Naofumi to a race for the village, but he refuses until the villagers begs him to give her all the smoke. They go on their mounts and begins the race. Naofumi takes an early lead, but the knights create a hole in the ground to trip Philo, allowing the spear to pass him. Naofumi makes a comeback, so another knight casts a speed debuff on them. Philo goes plus ultra and passes him once more. Then a knight casts haste on the spear, but Naofumi uses air shield to jump over a trap and wall runs to get beside him and beats the spear at the very end. Philo transforms into a queen chocobo. Some Mine comes over to accuse them of cheating, but the secret service reveals that she's the one that broke the rules, so she goes away. The villagers wants to reward him, so Philo chooses the carriage. While traveling, Raphtalia comes down with motion sickness, so they decide to set up camp and drifts off to dreamland. Naofumi awakens with a lawsuit on his lap and begins to freak out. He carries Philo to the shopkeeper for clothes that doesn't tear when she transforms, but he sends them to a clothes shop. But she doesn't have any magical thread. So she sends them to the magic shop, but she doesn't have any magic stones. So she sends them away until she gets some. They travel along a path but sees a man who is in need of a lift to his village. Naofumi decides to leave the carriage and carries the man home so his mother can receive her medicine. Naofumi feeds it to her, which causes the lady to be immediately healed, then collects his pay from his passenger. He realizes that he can start an Uber and begins traveling around transporting people and selling medicines to the ill. While transporting a merchant, the road up ahead gets blocked by bandits. They ask for the merchant, so Raphtalia goes down and uses magic to go stealth, then performs a team ultimate with Philo to take them down. He practices bondage and threatens to make Philo have them for lunch, so they carry him to their base so he can take all their shit. To thank Naofumi, the merchant teaches him how to make jewelry and shows him a mine filled with magic stones. They get the magic shopkeeper and carry her to the dungeon. They head inside, but they're suddenly caught in a genjutsu and hear their loved ones speak ill of them. The mage dispels their attack, then Philo gives the monsters a blowjob. They travel further into the dungeon and finds a room filled with crystals, but a chimera is guarding it. His party runs forward and attacks, but they get knocked down. Naofumi blocks the pussycat so Philo can drop kick it and rescue him from the shock of his life. Raphtalia goes stealth, but it hears her and tries to give a kiss. They realize that it has very good hearing, so he makes Philo scream into a microphone to give the mage the chance to cook it while Raphtalia performs surgery, leaving Philo to land a fatality. They head to the shop so Philo can make magic threads to carry to the dressmaker so she can get clothes that won't tear when she transforms. The next day, they get a mission to deliver plant killers to a village. They go inside and find out that the plants have been attacking anyone who tries to leave and has been feeding on their people to make them sick. He goes over and uses his shield to create an antidote to heal them. The villagers begs him to defeat the plants and explains that the spear hero gave them the seed to plant to cure them of hunger, but it became too much and started to attack everyone. They offer all their money to hire him, so he goes out to destroy the vegans' food. They find a giant tree in the city, so Philo decides to give it a little poke, but it instantly regenerates. So Naofumi commands them to do a tag team attack, but Raphtalia gets bondaged, but since it's PG, Naofumi walks forward and destroys all the branches that touch him, so he can use the plant killer to destroy the vegan king. He unlocks a skill that allows him to manipulate the plant's growth rate, and goes back to the village to plant a seed that he altered to grow many fruits but won't attack people. The villagers thank him for his help and he leaves with many fruits in his carriage that he carries to the merchant so he can sell them. They travel down a path and hears a story about a village that has been affected by a plague. Our party goes to check it out and offers to sell medicine to all their sick. They go inside and treat the ill with potions but realizes that they couldn't save everyone. They pay him for his work, but Naofumi tells him that their sickness will return. They reveal that the sword hero defeated a dragon near the village, but after he left, the dragon's flesh began to rot and makes everyone around it sick. But no one can remove it because of the poison. Naofumi decides that he will save them and charges 500 silver to take care of the problem. They travel into the mountain and runs through many monsters until they encounter the dragon's loot box. Naofumi steps towards it, but the dragon suddenly begins reassembling and returns from hell. They try to run, but Philo comes forth and uses double kick. Naofumi tries to call her back, but she becomes its dinner. The dragon uses poison fog on them, and Naofumi decides that he will never lose anything again and channels all his hate into the shield. He begins walking forward, so the dragon gives him a high five. But he blocks it and uses Black Air Force energy to blow it away and transforms into Rage Shield. The dragon uses Tail Whip but gets fired. As Naofumi begins walking forward while blocking all its attacks and burns everything he hates. But he hears Raphtalia's voice and returns to his senses. She collapses to the floor, so he tries to heal her, but it has no effect. The monster gets his attention but begins to cry in pain and returns to being unalive to his surprise. Raphtalia congratulates him on defeating the dragon as Philo exits his stomach by ripping it apart from the inside, until she found a crystal that she ate. They return to the village. Naofumi tells the mayor to cure Raphtalia of her curse, but he tells Naofumi that he has to go to a church and buy holy water to heal her. He goes out to his harem where Philo gives him the crystal she found and he feeds it to his shield. He apologizes for allowing them to get hurt, but they tell him that they're partly to blame. He tells them that the three of them will continue to get stronger by working together and tells them to get some rest. The next day, our party finds themselves surrounded by monsters, but Raphtalia is still suffering from her curse. Seeing that it's getting worse, Naofumi decides to cancel their mission and return to the capital, but they spot a girl in the forest surrounded by chocobos. She comes over to Philo and begins showing her some love, so Philo transforms and go off to play with her. Naofumi goes to heal the sick and wraps Raphtalia's wounds. Philo comes back with the girl and she asks if she can travel with them to the capital. Philo and Raphtalia convinces him and she promises that her father will reward him greatly. They go towards the capital while fighting monsters and catching fish to turn into their dinner. In the night, they realize that Philo has been too quiet and goes over to see that the girl is missing. They begin thinking that Philo ate her, but she awakens and reveals to them that she was sleeping inside. Raphtalia realizes that she is much more fluffy than she thought and falls asleep in the giant pillow. In the morning, they arrive at the capital and Philo decides to follow the girl home. Naofumi and Raphtalia head towards the church. He goes inside and sees the Pope walking towards him. He asks the Pope for their best holy water, but the church tries to rip him off, so the Pope scolds the nun and gets the real water to give him. They leave the extortion church, but a knight suddenly begins chasing them, so Naofumi runs away. He turns a corner and tells Raphtalia that he will lead him away for now. He runs into the open where the spear suddenly begins attacking him. He asks for Philo and reveals that he has fallen in love with her. He begins tossing many spears that destroys everything around them, so the knight steps between them and says that they can't fight in public. Mine arrives and commands the soldier to surround them and sanction the duel, but the girl comes forth and forbids them from fighting. It's revealed that she's Mine's sister. Melty scolds the spear for harming the public, then threatens Mine to tell their mother the next time she acts up. Raphtalia and Philo arrive, so the spear goes over to check on her. She says that she has been pulling the carriage, so he tries to attack Naofumi, which makes Philo transforms and kicks him in the baby makers. Melty asks to speak with them, so they go over to the shopkeeper's house. Melty tells them that she is first in line to be queen because Mine has personality issues, but Naofumi refuses to trust anybody who is related to Mine. A guard comes in to call her, so she wishes them goodbye and leaves. It's revealed that her mother sent her to punish the king and her sister for what they did to Naofumi. Philo doesn't understand why he treated her new friend like that and goes outside to cry. A group of knights comes by and heads inside. They reveal that they are all from the village he saved and they want to become a part of his party to fight with him. So Naofumi shows them a trinket and says that if they can get 150 silver to buy it from him, he will accept them. He buys more equipment for his party and finds out that Philo and Raphtalia is ready for a class change, but he can only do it at the hourglass. He heads to the extortion church, where they charge him a fortune to do a class change, but when he tries to pay, the corrupt nun steps up and says that the kidnapping king forbid them from helping the shield hero. So he leaves and heads over to the trader. Naofumi asks if he knows a way to do it. He tells them that there are 3 other hourglasses that exists and recommends him to the furry kingdom. Naofumi realizes that he won't make it before the next wave, so the trader decides to give Philo a weapon to use until then. They head back to their room where Naofumi can wrap Raphtalia's wound. She asks him if she can be with him when he goes back home, but Philo interrupts them, so he decides to send his harem to bed. In the morning, they begin traveling on the road and encounters a town that's destroyed and filled with poor and starving people. They tell him that the Bow hero smoked a king that was overtaxing the people, but when the new king took over, they also began doing the same thing. They head back to the capital and goes into a pub to have lunch. They see the bow and sword hero, who comes over and blames him for taking the credit for their work. Naofumi reveals that the bow hero made the situation of the town worse than before and tells the sword hero about the rotting corpse of the dragon he slayed. then leaves them to go to the shopkeeper's place. The knights shows up with the 150 silver, so Naofumi gives them the accessory and tells them to use it and buy new gear before adding them to his party. The next day, they begin preparing for the wave. Naofumi gives Raphtalia a bracelet he made and gives Philo a hair clip as a gift. The time counts down for the wave to begin. They're all teleported away. The knights save the villagers but almost get eaten, but Naofumi's party does a team ultimate to take it down. They see a kung fu grandma dishing out pain, so the knights tell them to go and defeat the boss while they protect the village. Philo runs through the forest and sees the Flying Dutchman's ship. She jumps up to the top where they see the sword hero fighting a Jack Sparrow that keeps respawning and the spear fighting a kraken. They're backed into a corner and begins to argue, so Naofumi comes down to say that they must work together. Naofumi notices that the shadow of Jack Sparrow is alive and tells Raphtalia to cast her light magic to attack it along with the sword hero. All the shadows begin to combine into a phantom, so the useless heroes uses lightning attacks that does nothing. The monster charges a hyper beam and blows away everyone but Naofumi's party. Philo goes forth to test if the monster has a foot fetish, but her attacks are doing little damage. Naofumi decides that he's going to use his rage mode and activates it. He finds himself in an abyss where he sees the zombie dragon and feels its hatred towards the sword hero and himself. His entire body begins to be consumed by the rage shield to form an armor. Philo goes berserk as well and knocks down the phantom, so Naofumi can burn it to greater death. Raphtalia shames the other heroes for just watching while Naofumi does all the work, so they begin to earn their pay and performs a team ultimate. Inside Naofumi, he begins to be consumed by rage but sees Raphtalia and comes back to his senses. He traps the monster in a prison, then gives it some new holes and finishes it off by summoning a hug from hell to embrace it and send the poor bastard back to the Shadow Realm. He deactivates the shield, but they see that another one have appeared, but it suddenly gets showered by death as a woman falls down and begins scolding the heroes for being worthless. Glass tells them that she is their enemy and challenges Naofumi to a fight. Everyone begins to surround her and uses the best attacks against Glass, but she takes no damage and wipes them out instead. Naofumi traps her, but she breaks out and deflects Raphtalia's attack. He tries to hold her down so Philo can use double kick, but all their attacks are futile. Seeing no other option, he decides to use the rage shield. Philo runs at her but gets pushed back, so Naofumi does the same and burns her, but it still does nothing. He decides to trap her in a prison and summon the hug from hell, but even that has no effect. The timer for the wave is coming to an end, so Naofumi tell Raphtalia to blind her so they can do the Joestar special. But Glass has aimbot for her sniper and forces Naofumi to deflect it, so she decides to return to the wave before it disappears. Naofumi sits in the aftermath of the wave and questions where Glass came from along with why she wants to fight him. The guards come over and orders him to follow them, and they take him to the Kidnapper King. He asks how Naofumi got so strong, but he tells the old bastard to kneel down and beg him for his secrets. The royal seat warmer gets upset, so Naofumi decides to peacefully leave the throne room, but the idiot threatens to hurt his harem. He turns around and says that if anything happens to them, he will cancel his subscription to life, then walks out of the room. Naofumi heads over to the shopkeeper and decides to get the class upgrades in the nation of furries. They begin their journey on the road and find that the shopkeeper gave them gifts, like a mana sword for Raphtalia that does no physical damage but still causes pain, along with other items for everyone else. They take a break on the road and begins to enjoy the scenery, but Melty suddenly catches up with them. Naofumi goes over to meet with her and she tells him to make up with her father. But the men behind Melty begin running at them with a sword, so he blocks the attack. The knights accuses Naofumi of taking the princess hostage and attacks him, but they get easily defeated by his party. The knights suspiciously calls a retreat and run away from them. They return to the capital and begins editing the footage from their recent fight to make Naofumi look like he was on demon time, then broadcast it all over the nation along with posters asking for their immediate arrest. Naofumi reveals that they're stuck because they can't enter the cities and begins to wonder why they want Melty gone. She says that it's most likely Mine who planned to frame him again so she can become next in line to be queen. He tells her that if she returns home she'll be sent to heaven and offers to take her with them. In the morning, Our party travels through the mountains while avoiding all the scouts looking for them, until they arrive at a cave to camp out in. Melty says that her mother commanded the king to treat all the heroes well, and reveals that their kingdom is ran by women, so her mom is their true leader. But now Fumi hears the soldiers coming, so they continue to travel through the forest to avoid the hunters. Melty trips over a cliff and alerts all the soldiers to their location. Our party starts running away until they encounter a dead end with the other heroes beginning to corner them from the other side. They tell Naofumi to release the princess, but Melty steps forward to explain that someone tried to smoke her, so he was protecting her from danger, and begs them to stop fighting among themselves. The red-haired bitch interrupts them and accuses Naofumi of having a brainwashing shield that he uses to control everyone he speaks to. Naofumi points out that if he could do that, his life would be much easier. But the Blade hero tells him to just hand over the princess and this will all be over. So Mine jumps on his D, then calls over Melty to come home with her. Melty realizes that she will become a hashtag if she goes back and begs Naofumi to protect her. So he tells Philo to transform and jumps over them to escape. But the spear hero seals Philo's chocobo form to make them fall and takes the chance to catch a prison sentence. Mine tries to become an only child, but Naofumi defends Melty from all the attacks and decides to activate his rage shield. As the rest of the army comes in to waste their arrows on him, Mine prepares to unleash the sun, but Raphtalia comes in clutch to defeat the witch while Philo finishes off the Twitch mod. The guards begin charging forward while ignoring the worthless heroes, so Naofumi launches an attack to blow them away and put distance between them. He tells the Blade hero to figure out what's happening in the kingdom and tosses him a hint before leaving. Our party camps out in the forest when a secret agent appears in front of them and tells Naofumi that the queen wishes to meet with them, then returns to the shadows. They realize that the forest has been set on fire by the biggest bitch ever to be written, drawn, and animated. They go to a nearby village and find out that the border to the demi-human nation is heavily guarded, so Naofumi decides to visit the queen instead. Melty tells them that she knows a loyal noble that can help them as the ruler of the region comes to greet them and invites our party to his home. They tell the ruler all that happened and goes inside a room to have their first proper sleep since they've been on the run. The next day, Naofumi notices that the ruler is being taken into custody. A maid suddenly bursts in to tell them to run from the soldiers and leads them into the kitchen to hide them in a closet. Melty comes forward and commands the soldiers to leave, but a man steps forward that puts murder on Raphtalia's mind. The fat mofo asks Melty for Naofumi, but she says that he has left the mansion to escape far away and commands him to take her home, so they leave to go to his manor. Naofumi comes out the closet and kindly asks Philo to show herself. She tells them that Melty started a game of hide and seek with her but never came back, so Naofumi decides to go find her. In the night, our party stand outside the big man's castle and sees the people rioting for their lord's freedom, so they take advantage of the confusion to sneak into Snorlax's home. They go over the walls and begins to defeat all the guards they encounter until Raphtalia stop at the entrance of a basement. But Naofumi says they'll return to it after saving Melty. Inside the castle, EDP tries to take Melty's cupcakes, but Frilo comes in clutch to cancel him. He takes Melty hostage, but Naofumi does a team ultimate with Frilo and saves her. She thanks them for rescuing her, but the walking whale gets up and take out his people corrector. Raphtalia begins walking over to the Discord mod while he belts her relentlessly, but she disarms him and put a sword at his breather. She reveals that the Fatman massacred many of her people after her village was destroyed and gets ready to save the world some oxygen. But Naofumi talks her out of traveling the dark path, so she decides to allow EDP to go free. He tries to make a comeback and manages to disarm her, but Raphtalia swaps to her secondary and penetrate him. He kicks her away but trips over his people corrector to smash against the glass and final destinations his way to the afterlife. Naofumi comforts Raphtalia as the ruler comes in and tells them to escape, so she carries the party to the place where EDP kept furries in the past. She begins going downstairs while remembering that after her parents passed away she promised not to cry anymore and began to motivate her village to rebuild everything that they lost. They pick up a flag that represented their village but spot soldiers that suddenly begin riding towards them. They started massacring the adults of the village while putting the children in carriages to bring to EDP's cupcake factory. He began to whip Raphtalia but quickly got bored because she refused to cry, so he swapped to a more cooperative victim to play with. Raphtalia goes over and tries to comfort her but finds that she's very ill. She tells Raphtalia that she wants to go home, so she makes her a flag to remind her of the good days they had. But a guard suddenly comes over and takes her to a carriage that carries her off to the circus where Naofumi found her. In the basement of horrors, they find that many of the furries that were captured are still alive. Raphtalia frees her friend and tells him that the shield hero has come to save them. He tells Raphtalia that something happened to her old cellmate, so she runs over to her and begins crying because she passed away from all the torture. Raphtalia blames herself for not being strong enough to help them, but the boy explains that the only reason they had hope was because of her smile. She tells them that she's worthless, but Naofumi reveals that without her he wouldn't have survived in this world and shows her all the children that she managed to save. Raphtalia gathers her friend's remains and promises to bring back the flag for their people as they leave the Dungeon of Horrors behind. They see that the Fatso is still alive and he begins breaking a seal on a pillar to summon a T-Rex to wipe out their party. The dragon cleanses the world of his existence, then begins attacking everything around it. So Naofumi starts retreating with his party, but the monster follows after them. They decide to split up and lure it out of town, while Raphtalia leaves her friend in the ruler's care and gives him her bracelet to hold onto before she leaves on Philo. The best girl begins running away from the monster and speeds through the forest until they're stopped by a lake. They prepare to fight the T-Rex and blocks his charge with an air shield, but it breaks through. Philo gives it a tummy tuck while Raphtalia attempts to penetrate it, but it's too thick, so Naofumi performs a team ultimate with Philo, but not even that has any effect. The monster uses Earthquake to push everyone away and use Tail Whip on Naofumi. He decides to use his Black Air Force energy shield, but a voice tells him not to. A mist suddenly begins to appear around the battlefield and chocobos begins flooding out of the forest to surround them. They see a giant geyser erupts from the lake as a queen chocobo flies over their heads and tells them to stand back. The T-Rex rushes at her and gets introduced to her feet, so it launches a flamethrower that gets easily blocked by her. The queen decides to effortlessly defeat the poor creature, then turns her attention to Naofumi. She transforms into a prison charge and introduces herself as the queen of all chocobo in the world. Vittoria tells them to come with her, but Naofumi goes to get a quick power-up before they leave. She takes our party to the ruins that were defended by the original 4 heroes. But Philo is hungry, so Naofumi prepares a meal to feed an entire army. Everyone falls asleep and Vittoria comes over to Naofumi to talk with him in private. He tells her everything that happened and she scolds the heroes for fighting among themselves. Vittoria reveals that the waves have been happening across the world and each of the heroes were supposed to go to one of the 4 countries to fight against the monsters. And because they were slacking off, she had to fight the waves in the other 3 by herself, but explains that eventually she won't be able to fight off the monsters single-handedly. Vittoria tells him to work with the other heroes, but Naofumi says that will never happen. So she tells him that if they can't do their jobs, she will create a hero pack and summon another set of heroes to fight the wave. They return to the group where Vittoria goes over to Melty and traps her in a wind prison. She tells Naofumi to work with the other heroes, but he continues to refuse and begins to activate Rage Shield. So Vittoria shuts it down and decides that if Naofumi can prove to her that his party is strong enough to defeat the waves, she'll allow him to continue existing. She challenges Philo to a one-on-one, so she takes on the challenge and a barrier is placed around them. Philo starts off with a kick but misses and is tossed into the sky to receive a back massage. She gets up and begins to use her magic to summon a tornado to blow off Vittoria, but it gets easily dispelled by her. Naofumi attempts to free Melty, so she finger blasts him against the wall and goes on to pimp slaps Philo. Vittoria tells her that she's weak and questions how she'll help the hero before blowing her away. Philo gets back up, so Vittoria begins absorbing all the mana around her. She charges at the queen, but she's stopped by a barrier, but Philo manages to push through and lands a blow on Vittoria's face. She tells Philo that she won and frees Melty from the cage, then goes on to heal Philo, and summons a crown to name her as the new successor of the Chocobos. Vittoria turns to Naofumi and gives him access to the entire skill tree of the Chocobo shield. In the night, they hold a celebration for Philo becoming royalty. where Futoria asks Naofumi why he didn't try to clear his name, and he explained that no one would believe him. She reveals that if even one hero passes, because they're too weak, the waves will become impossible for any of them to defeat. So he finally caves in and decides that he will try to work with them. Then she lies in his lap as it's revealed that her master was the previous shield hero. The next day, Futoria carries them to a nearby hero, then they leave to continue their journey. They travel through the forest until they encounter a fort with the spear hero blocking their path. Naofumi asks to speak with him, but the idiot accuses him of brainwashing people and begins to attack without reason. He remembers his promise to Futoria and refuses to fight back, but instead take his attacks head-on. Naofumi asks why he's mad at him, so he reveals that the bow and sword hero has been sent to heaven. He asks the spear if he saw their body, which he obviously did not. The evil bitch comes in to warn the spear about Naofumi's made-up ability and seals them in a cage made of lightning. He attacks our boy, so he puts the spear in timeout, but he breaks it. Naofumi calls over Philo, but Mine joins the battle to try and unleash the sun, so Melty comes forward to dispel her attack. Philo attacks the spear and begins throwing hands to push him back, but the spear tries to counter and Naofumi knocks him away. The spear begins using his spells to keep him in place so he can get buffed by his party, and throw a combo attack that Naofumi narrowly manages to block. Raphtalia joins the battle and distracts the spear so Naofumi can summon the Gok Gok shield to suck out all his skill points, then calls over Philo to finish him off while Raphtalia cuts down the psychopath. The spear shames Naofumi for brainwashing his harem, so he calls over the 2 counts of prison to wipe out his entire party. Philo suddenly transforms to kick everyone over to Naofumi and tells him to put up all his strongest shields, as a giant laser comes down from the sky to shatter all the defenses he placed until it reaches Naofumi, who attempts to single-handedly fend off the attack. They stand in a giant crater as someone comes over and congratulates them for surviving. The Pope stands before them and explains that he's going to give them an invitation to God. Then blame all of it on the shield hero so the church can overthrow the queen and take control of the country. The Pope draws for his godsender and fires a blast that Naofumi barely manages to block. The Pope swaps out his sword for a spear, and it's revealed that long ago someone duplicated the weapons of the heroes, but even though it was strong, a large amount of mana was needed to power the weapon, so no one could wield it. The spear hero steps up and uses an attack that is blocked by a barrier, then doubles down on his stupidity by launching more attacks that also gets blocked. 2 powerful skills suddenly comes down to break through the Pope's shield as it's revealed that the sword and bow heroes are still alive. They explained that they were investigating the church and found a secret file that led to a temple. However, when they entered, it became a giant gender reveal party, but they were saved by the Queen's Secret Service. They tell Naofumi that they believe he was framed and reveals that the Queen's army is heading towards them. The heroes decide that for the first time they'll fight together, but Naofumi decides to work with his party instead. The spear scolds him for not working with them, but Naofumi reveals that all he has been doing since he got to this world was be Mine's puppet. The other heroes agrees, but Naofumi tells them that they forked up just as much as him, and it's because of them that the church got so powerful. The Pope interrupts them and hands out an invitation to God, but Naofumi kindly declines it. He reveals to everyone that he hates the heroes just as much as he hates the Pope, but he remembers his promise to Futoria and decides that he'll work with them until they get through this fight. The Pope decides to use his domain expansion to summon a sanctuary around them, so the heroes begins to use their abilities, but they're all blocked until Philo and Raphtalia uses a tag team attack to land a blow on him, but he's immediately healed by his domain. Naofumi gets on Philo and grabs the spear hero to get close to the Pope. He tells the spear to attack him, then uses the counter spell to show him the light, but he wants all the smoke and use the sword to blow them off. Naofumi decides to activate his Black Force energy and gets confronted by all his anger. He begins to give in to his rage and is tempted to turn the world to ash. He starts walking forward while on demon time, but he hears Philo's voice and is confronted by all the happy memories he made in this world. All his harem comes over to break him out of the berserk mode and tells him that they'll always be by his side. Naofumi goes to the heroes and asks them to help him, and everyone begins to attack the Pope together and overwhelms him. The spear throws his rod to penetrate the holy man's no-no squares to allow Naofumi to rush towards him. and dodge his flame attack to absorb it into his shield, then unleash it upon the Pope to send him to hell. He recovers from the ass beating and begins to easily defeat the heroes with his holy weapon. The Pope changes to the bow and fires at the eclipse to trap everyone in a genjutsu that makes them begin to panic. He decides to end the fight with one more attack, but the Queen arrives on the battlefield and casts a spell to freeze the Pope in place and dispels the illusion. Naofumi takes the chance to use his rage skill to sacrifice the fluids in his body, to summon a bear trap that takes the Pope into the sky and unite him with the god he worshipped for so long. The sanctuary begins to fall apart as the Queen arrives to arrest the defeated worshippers, but they see that Naofumi is still suffering from the recoil of his skill. He awakens in a room surrounded by his harem and discovers that he has been asleep for 3 days, but he won't be able to fight for a month. The Queen enters his room and thanks Naofumi for all he has done for their kingdom, but he reveals that her country hates him. She explains that each of the 4 regions was supposed to summon one hero to fight the waves, but while she was away, the kidnapper king summoned the heroes by himself, and this forced her to travel to the other regions to stop them from starting a war with her nation. He asks why they despise the shield, and she says that each kingdom views the heroes differently, such as the demi-human region who worships the shield like a god. Naofumi plans to travel there, but the Queen tells him to wait until after she clears his name before he leaves their kingdom and rewards him with a bag for all his hard work. The next day, a huge crowd gathers outside the castle. Naofumi walks upstairs until he encounters the other heroes and enters the throne room to meet with the Queen. They notice that the room seems a bit cleaner as the Queen commands the guards to bring the garbage inside. She reveals that they are on trial for all the crimes that they've committed, so they begin begging for their worthless lives. The Queen puts the old bastard on ice, then restrains the evil bitch so they can place a truth crest on her and burns good into her soul. The Queen begins the trial by revealing that the garbage duo sponsored the church that tried to smoke the other heroes and wanted to blame Naofumi for it. Mine tries to deny it, but she gets a taste of justice. The Queen also accuses her of trying to smoke Melty and frame the shield hero for it, and even the king seems surprised by how evil she is. Mine protests, but the truth continues to shine through her dark soul. The Queen then charges the king for summoning the heroes without her knowledge, but he explains that he needed them to survive the waves, and points out that Naofumi assaulted Mine on the first night, so she asks her if it's true. Mine tries her best to lie, but the truth hurts more than getting a BBC up the A. Everyone in the country watches as the truth about everything is revealed, and it's proven that she's a lying bitch for all to see. The Queen brings the trial to an end and punishes her family by sentencing them to the Shadow Realm. They take the 2 criminals to the Neck Dividers, where the Queen names them as traitors to the kingdom, and prepares to relieve them of their mortal vessels by taking off their melons. Mine turns to Naofumi and begins begging him to save her, so he stops the execution and goes down to reveal that the death penalty is too good for these idiots, and decides that from this day on, the king's name will be Trash and Mine's name will be Bitch, but while on adventures she'll be known as Whore. The Queen accepts this as their punishment and officially change their names, then goes on to abolish the church that stood against their kingdom. Naofumi walks away with his name cleared, but the Queen asks him to stay one more night so they can celebrate with him. He reveals to her that he'll start working together with all the nations because he is one of the 4 heroes. Then meets with Melty on the bridge to part ways with her and begins to leave with his harem. The people gather around them and praise him as their savior, while the knights salute him for all he has done to protect their region. The shield hero walks forth with his name redeemed and decides that his new purpose will be to fight the waves wherever they appear. They travel to the uncorrupted church and go inside to get the class upgrade for Philo and Raphtalia. After the ceremony was complete, they reveal that they didn't get to choose a class, and returns to the Queen, where she explains that special items can interfere with a job change. So Naofumi begins thinking it happened because of Vittoria's crown. The Queen invites him to meet with the rest of the summoned heroes, and reveals that an island that gives bonus XP will be activating soon. But before they go, the heroes should share all the secrets they've learned with each other so everyone can survive the upcoming wave. They ask Naofumi how he got so OP, but he tells them to go first. The spear reveals that you can copy any weapon from your class just by touching it. Then the sword says that you craft items by feeding the materials to your weapons. and the bow explains that they can fast travel to any location that they've been before. The heroes suddenly begin arguing over whose grinding strats are the best. So Naofumi scolds them for being idiots and leave the room. He returns to his area with Raphtalia and decides to try out the weapon copy system, but it doesn't show up until he starts believing in what they said. Then the option appears and gets added to his menu. The next day, Naofumi meets up with the queen but finds out that the other heroes already left, so he leaves to go over to the shopkeeper's store. He picks up a shield and makes an exact copy of it to the shopkeeper's dismay. Then they begin taking all his shit to make Naofumi even more overpowered than he already was. They begin their journey to the island, but Raphtalia wants to go on a side quest. She visits her old home and lays her friend to her final resting place. While Naofumi walks through the destroyed village where a man suddenly calls to him, but a female comes over and tells the stranger to leave. Raphtalia returns to Naofumi and asks him if he's gonna leave them one day. He tells her that he'll stay to defend the world from the waves, then they continue on their main mission. Our party arrives at the port and boards a ship that's going to the island. They see the adventurers they met before and introduces themselves to each other, but they don't believe that Naofumi is the shield hero because they heard that he's a scumbag, and decides to work together to grind levels. They go up to the deck to see the other heroes suffering from being a pussy. He tries to tell them what he found out, but they refuse to listen. The adventurers comes over to Naofumi and asks him to craft an item out of gems for them, so he decides to take on the job. They arrive on the island and begins to massacre all the harmless creatures that's going about their day. But the monsters stop giving them XP as the other heroes come over and reveals that too many people are hunting in the same area. They begin arguing over who should stay, so Naofumi leaves and heads over to another dungeon. Our party begins hunting bigger monsters to get more XP, but Raphtalia shows that their weapons are almost destroyed. So Naofumi goes over and tries out the crafting feature to create new weapons for them to use in combat. In the night, they begin gathering all the items they found, where Naofumi reveals that he still feels weak after defeating the Pope. The adventurers comes out of the forest to call them back to the main island, so they decide to stop grinding for today. On the island, everyone begins drinking together while having a party, and for the first time Naofumi finally feels like he belongs. The next day, Naofumi gives Therese her accessory and she begins crying from how beautiful it is. She pays him with a bag and they begin traveling to another dungeon to hunt animals together. They find penguins with missing chromosomes and start to slaughter the fugly-looking mofos. Therese begins chanting to unleash the power of her gem to cleanse one from this world, while everyone else continues to slaughter the poor bastards. They encounter the mother of the fugly babies, so Naofumi decides to go out and call over the physically challenged creatures, allowing Therese to give them all the smoke, but Naofumi was healed from the flames instead. Then everyone goes and takes Mama Fugly down. They go back to the main island and part ways with the adventurers, but Naofumi decides that he'll ask them to join his party the next time they meet. They head to the beach to enjoy the day, but Philo comes over and tells Naofumi that she found an underwater dungeon. Our party begins swimming down in perfectly normal clothing until they arrive at the entrance and opens the giant door to find a platform floating inside. Raphtalia uses her light magic and they see another dragon hourglass that begins counting down for the next wave that will appear in 2 days. They use the fast travel function and return to the queen to tell her what they found. So she gathered her entire army on ships to fight against the upcoming wave. The raid on their world begins with soldiers throwing barrels of wine into the water to explode on impact and paralyzes the monsters so they can receive acupuncture. They see a giant fish heading towards the bow hero and he launches his skill at the monster, but it dives under the ocean to attack their ships. Naofumi takes Philo and goes into the water to chase after it. He taunts the monster so it can follow him to the surface, where all the other heroes take the chance to use their team ultimate on the mutated fish. But it wasn't enough and it destroys their ships. The facially challenged creatures begin climbing on board, but Melty uses water magic to protect them from swimming with the fishes. A monster comes from behind to take her hostage, but Lark comes in clutch to rescue the princess and begins wiping out the Ripjaws easily. Philo dives underwater to lure the creature once more into the sky, but this time Therese and Lark uses a team ultimate to make the monster become past tense. Naofumi goes over and thanks Lark for his help while the other heroes comes over to collect the loot they didn't work for. Lark begins scolding them for being weak pieces of shit and blows them off with one swipe of his scythe. He reveals to Naofumi that they're also heroes like him but from the other side of the wave. And for his world to survive he must take out all the heroes of this world so the monsters can destroy it. The queen commands her army to attack the new heroes. But Therese blocks their body piercers and begins to cast a spell to rain down fire upon the entire armada, but she also creates a rainstorm to put out the flames. Lark tells them that they're here only to take out Naofumi and begins to attack him. The harem tries to assist, but they're blocked and are blown away, forcing Naofumi to stop his next attack and suck out some of his skill points. Lark goes back into clash with Naofumi, but he takes damage even though he blocked it. So Raphtalia takes on the fight for him while Therese tries to burn Naofumi. But the gem refuses to harm him, so she swaps it out. Naofumi asks why Lark's attacks are so strong, and he explains that his weapon gives him the ability to turn his target's defense into his attack. Melty joins the battle and gives them a moral boost, so Naofumi decides that to win he just won't get hit. The fight continues with Naofumi's party working together to overwhelm Lark from all angles, until he gets hit by the prison duo combo attack and gets pushed against the air shield so Raphtalia can strike him down, but Therese saves him at the very last moment. They begin to have a standoff, but Glass joins the battle to face Naofumi with them. She starts off by using an attack that manages to push him back, then follows up with sniper shot, but he tanks all of it. So she begins attacking up close, but when she sees the Gok shield she chooses to run away. Therese begins chanting to use a team ultimate with Glass, so Naofumi creates a shield to block the onslaught of their combo attack. He tells his party to let him fight Glass alone while they hold off the other heroes and leads her away to another ship. Glass reveals that she's the fan hero and continues the fight, but when she gets close enough Naofumi changes to the Gok shield that sucks out her life points instead of her skill points. He tells Glass to return to her world, but she tries attacking again and gets her soul snatched. She stands again to reveal that in her world her people are currently fighting against the wave and are waiting for her to return victorious, so she can't stop fighting until the end. Naofumi questions if his world is worth saving as Lark throws her a potion to return her strength. Glass starts attacking him, but Raphtalia comes over and proclaims that she is Naofumi's sword, so no one from their world will ever suffer again. Glass rushes in and Naofumi blocks her attack, then swaps to the rage shield to push her away, but she continues to get back up. Glass prepares to go all out while Naofumi starts his Black Force activity. He reveals that when all the waves are gone he's going back home, but he will protect this world for his harem to continue living in. He begins casting his rage skill and gets ready to summon the bear trap, but he's stopped at the last moment. A knight launches barrels of wine at them for Naofumi to destroy and make Glass intoxicated. He walks over to the defeated Glass, but Lark and Therese arrives to reveal that the wave time has ran out, so they begin to be transported back to their world. After the waves disappear, the queen declares that they've won the battle and they begin celebrating. The next day, Naofumi begins thinking about Glass's party and realizes that they're much stronger than the heroes. So he decides that they'll start recruiting more members into his group to fight off the waves, and Philo conveniently finds a knight in the river. Rishia tells them that she tried breathing water because the bow hero kicked her out of his party for allegedly breaking his accessory. But Naofumi believes they're just jealous since she was more useful in the waves. He invites her to join his party and promises to help her get strong enough to style on her former allies. They decide that it's time to leave the island, and the queen thanks them for all their help during the waves. She asks Naofumi what he wants for an award, and he decides to do something for Raphtalia. They head back to the shopkeeper to get everyone some new gear, but they seem to be hiding something from the best girl. They leave to go get the queen's reward, and Raphtalia realizes that they're near her home. Her friend runs over to meet her while the noble and Melty follows close behind. Melty announces that by order of the queen, Naofumi has become the lord of the demi-human domain within their kingdom. He carries Raphtalia over to the shipyard and asks her to teach everyone to fish, then heads over to the Great Hall where she sees that the Kung Fu Grandma along with the medicine and magic store owners have moved there too. Naofumi takes her on the roof where she sees that everything is being rebuilt. He tells her that they will build an army here to defend against the wave. But Raphtalia stops him and begins crying because he's preparing them for when he isn't here anymore. She begs him to live in this world with her even after they've defeated all the waves. Naofumi tells her that he wasn't sure what to do next, but he has decided to stay and make this new world his home, before reminding Raphtalia that she is his sword. It's revealed that privacy does not exist as Philo comes in for a group hug, while they raise the demi-human flag to stand tall over Naofumi's domain. A few weeks later, we find Naofumi walking through the rebuilt city. He checks on Rishia's training with Kung Fu Grandma, and tells her that even though the costume boosts her stats, she shouldn't depend on it. But Rishia tells them that she tries harder while inside the costume since she's more confident. They see a flock of bats heading towards them, but Philo comes in clutch along with Raphtalia to send the unholy creatures to meet Bat Jesus. Naofumi arrives to see the monsters slaughtered and takes a sample to discover that they're familiars. He notices that the wave's countdown has stopped as an immense pressure falls over them that's shown to be coming from something far out in the distance. They head to the royal capital to have an emergency meeting with the queen. All the heroes have encountered the bat monsters, so the queen reveals that it's an effect from a legendary monster that revives every few centuries called the Spirit Tortoise. The worthless heroes decide that they want nothing to do with a raid boss and leaves the room with only Naofumi remaining. The queen tells him that many people have already passed from the calamity and it will visit his domain soon if nothing is done, so he's forced to help. They go over to the shopkeeper to get a weapon for Rishia, but she reveals that no matter what she uses, she'll always be a failure. Raphtalia comes up with a 100 IQ idea and takes the poor girl to the circus to become one of Naofumi's workers who doesn't get paid. Raphtalia explains that if Rishia gives up her freedom, the shield hero's power would transfer to her and make her much stronger than the bow hero's party. Naofumi is hesitant to get another servant, but Rishia begs him to go through with it. The traitor forms the contract between them and she officially joins his harem. But Naofumi tells her that she'll have to train hard to gain the bow hero's respect, and Rishia thanks him for believing in her. They begin their journey towards the Spirit Tortoise while stopping along the way to catch some fish to turn into their dinner. While sitting by the campfire, Philo starts talking to Vittoria and informs Naofumi that if he still can't work together with the other three heroes, he needs to take down the giant turtle. So he decides to journey into the Spirit Tortoise Kingdom. They arrive inside the region and hears a rumor that the other three heroes have passed, so Rishia goes to find out if it's true. Naofumi stops her from running off, then tells Philo to ask Vittoria what happened, and she reveals that all the heroes are still alive. A horde of monsters suddenly shows up and begins attacking all the villagers around them. Our party begins defending everyone from the invading army of merciless creatures while Naofumi taunts all the monsters and lead them away so he can blow them off, but more of them begins arriving on the battlefield. He activates his Black Force energy and uses his rage skill to wipe out all the remaining monsters around him. But the ability drained a lot of his stamina. Naofumi's harem goes down to check on him as a mysterious woman shows up and asks them to send her to heaven so the attacks can end. But the tortoise begins roaring and the woman disappears without a trace. Naofumi attends a meeting with all the nations affected by the attacks. It's revealed that the ruler of the Spirit Tortoise Land and his entire family has gone to heaven, but the giant turtle has now stopped to take a break. They decide that they'll call on the 7-star heroes to join the fight. The queen explains that these heroes have vassal weapons that select their users from either this world or another, but they're still weaker than cardinal heroes like Naofumi. The mysterious woman suddenly enters the meeting and it's revealed that she's the concubine of the fallen king of this nation. She reveals that she's a familiar of the Spirit Tortoise, similar to the monsters that are attacking people. However, since she's a human type, her job was to infiltrate the kingdom to cause a war, so they can gather souls to stop the timer of the waves if the heroes can no longer defend against it. But someone has broken the seal prematurely, which forced the Torterra to go on a rampage. Naofumi asks her how to stop it, and she reveals the super secret information that if you take off something's head it will no longer move. All the world leaders begins arguing over who should take command of the armies and take credit for defeating the raid boss. But Naofumi gets up and scolds them for being idiots before declaring that he will deal with it himself to protect his territory. Raphtalia goes back to the group to report what happened and sees that Kung Fu Grandma and Eclair has arrived to help them. They explain that Eclair is the lord of the land that Naofumi's domain reside inside, and she has been training their soldiers to repent for her late father failing to stop what happened to Raphtalia's village in the first wave. The next day, Naofumi makes a plan on how to defeat the spirit tortoise with the other generals and sees an abandoned fortress in the distance that he decides to blow up as a trump card. He tells everyone to head back to figure out a way to take its head while Rishia goes with Ost to find information on the turtle. Everyone begins doing their best to prepare for the raid boss's arrival, but the giant mutated turtle has begun to make its move. Eclair starts off the raid by commanding the royal army to march forth, while Naofumi rides beside them and gives everyone a moral boost before they get massacred. They see the army of familiars coming towards them and prepares to do battle. Philo heads off in front so Naofumi can taunt the monsters away from the main army and gives them the chance to face the spirit tortoise directly. Eclair begins leading her men into a narrow entrance while Naofumi gets blocked off by monsters and decides to take them all out. Ost steps up and casts a spell to introduce all her siblings to the floor, so our party can massacre her family while they can do nothing to defend themselves. The Secret Service reports to them that the turtle was not stopped by the ambush. However, they managed to injure one of its legs before ending their subscription to life. But the commander of the Spirit Tortoise Nation stayed back to sacrifice himself and avenge his fallen monarch. Everybody goes over to the fallen animal, but they have no idea how to take off its thinker. The monster enters its second phase and begins firing long-ranged abilities to slaughter all who remains around it. Naofumi tells everyone to go in the carriage and tells the agent to send out the mages. Eclair sees Naofumi heading towards the raid boss and decides to follow him into danger with all her men. But some of the army lacks plot armor and does not survive the destruction that the turtle is causing. Naofumi closes in on the turtle, but another familiar blocks its path, so Ost holds it down with her magic while the knight steps in front of him to attack the creature. So Naofumi can go on ahead to take down the main monster before it can get back up. The mages finishes their chant and brings down judgment to burn a hole into the monster's breather. Raphtalia and Philo takes the chance to use a team ultimate that causes its wound to bleed, and Naofumi launches an air shield to keep it open while Ost comes in clutch to give him a buff and make the hole bigger. Rishia uses support magic so the dream team can charge at the monster to separate its thinker from its body and brings an end to the raid. The armies begin cheering for the victory they managed to pull off while Naofumi is saddened because Ost passed away along with the turtle. But she's revealed to still be alive and tells them that the turtle has not gone to the Shadow Realm. They decide to go on the spirit turtle's back to find a way to bring an end to the monster. Ost leads them to a village that was built on the turtles while it slept and calls the royal army to recover the bodies of the fallen. Rishia and Raphtalia is taking the scene very badly, but Ost is praying for their souls, so Rishia decides to join her while the soldiers grieve for their loss. They find a temple in the distance and enters it to find a diagram of the spirit tortoise where it's revealed that Rishia has a talent in translating ancient writings. They discover some drawing in Japanese that Naofumi goes over to read. Ost arrives and says that she knows how to end the turtle, but the temple started collapsing and they're forced to leave or become pancakes. The agent says that the turtle will revive soon, but Ost tells them that to defeat the spirit tortoise they must travel inside its body and destroy the heart. Naofumi sends back the Queen Eclair and Kung Fu Grandma along with Rishia, but she tells them that she wants to accompany them because she's a member of their party. They travel inside the shrine to enter the turtle's body, but they're suddenly attacked by adventurers. Raphtalia brightens the area and they begins to behave very suspicious, so she uses light magic to show their true form. It's revealed that the adventurers are really the heroes from the other world. Naofumi asks what they're doing here and Lark tells him that his party is here to defeat the person who broke the seal, because he's a world hopper who goes around releasing legendary beasts to cause untold destruction onto worlds. Lark asks for an alliance, but Naofumi refuses and says that if they don't attack he won't either. The two groups part ways peacefully and continues their journey deeper within the cave. Naofumi comes upon another dragon hourglass, but this one shows how much souls the spirit turtle has collected. And Ost explains that when it's full, a shield should be summoned to protect the world from the waves. They move on and walk until they find the monster's mouth, where Ost opens a pathway that leads directly to its heart. Our party finds its blood pumper, but a man comes from behind it and reveals that he's the book vassal holder. Naofumi asks what happened to the other heroes, but he refuses to tell them. Naofumi tells him to go back to his world and cause trouble, so he wishes them farewell before the heart's defense activates and begins blasting them. Philo lands an attack, but Ost takes damage from it as well. Raphtalia goes to land a finishing blow while looking at her friend, but goes through with it to protect her world from destruction. Ost meets with the spirit tortoise and begins to regain all her lost memories. She awakens from her short nap and reveals that the turtle is still alive. She casts a spell to create a hole in the ground and tells them to leave before it fully revives itself. The turtle had regenerated to face the entire army while Naofumi's party arrives at its core. The book vassal welcomes them to the room and reveals that Ost is not a familiar, but she's actually the spirit tortoise herself. Ost reveals that the true way to defeat the turtle is to destroy the heart and head simultaneously. But the book vassal shows them that he's using the other 3 heroes as a battery to power up his monster. The turtle begins charging an attack to wipe them out, but Vittoria arrives on the battlefield to tank the blast and begins to push back the monsters. Then tell Naofumi that when he destroys the heart she will divide its neck. Lark arrives to join the party and goes to side with Naofumi, but the book heroes tries to form an alliance with them since they also wants to destroy this world. They refuse him because their vassal weapons is disgusted by his action. The book hero reveals that he conquered his weapon and summons a flaming bird to roast them, but Naofumi blocks it so Raphtalia and Philo can land an attack. He explains that his barrier draws power from the 3 idiots and causes them immense pain. He summons arrows from his book and everyone works together to block his attack. Ost prepares to open a hole to the heart, but he uses gravity magic to introduce them to the ground. He begins taunting Naofumi and tests if he has a foot fetish while Raphtalia is powerless to do anything about it. Rishia begins to stand up and slowly walks towards him. She says he uses other people's power instead of his own because he's actually very weak without it. He begins attacking, but she tanks everything he has and dashes towards him to aim for the head. He launches more fireballs at her, but she starts to hide in the smoke. While he's distracted, Ost goes over to give Naofumi the powers of the spirit tortoise. He accepts her gift to cast the most powerful spell known to his world. Raphtalia and Philo launches an attack while Ost opens a doorway to the heart. The book vassal tries to stop them, but Rishia reminds him that she's gonna give him an ass beating. She manages to push him back, so he casts his strongest attack, but she gets the waifu boost and slays the flames and cut through the ice to shatter it. He begins using the heroes as hostages, so she breaks open the prison and places a sword at his breather. He puts up a barrier and continues attacking, but it has no effect. On the outside, the turtle charges a blast at Vittoria, but the mages comes in clutch to match it in a key blast power struggle. They begin to lose, but Vittoria charges forward to give the turtle a new breathing hole, allowing the skill to blow its mind. Philo signals to them that it's time to destroy the heart and the barrier surrounding the core is broken. The book vassal reveals that he has a backup plan to protect the core with all the souls that he has gathered, but Naofumi had enough of his bullshit and activates his black force energy. He begins casting his rage skill, but can't bring himself to take Ost's life along with the turtle's core. The book vassal begins laughing because he has won, but Ost activates the power that she placed inside his shield. It transforms him into a magical girl and summons blasters that she aims at the spirit tortoise core to destroy it and bring an end to this calamity. Ost lies unmoving on the floor while the book hero reveals that he still kept some of the souls that was collected and uses it to open a portal to another world so he can escape. Naofumi asks Ost why she did it, and she explains that he will no longer need to use the Wrath Shield because she has left something more powerful within him. Lark calls him over and tells them that they will head after the book hero to bring an end to this. But Ost tells Naofumi to go with them before the portal closes. He calls over his party to fulfill her last wish and jumps into another world. While Ost's life comes to an end and her soul ascends to a better place. Her spirit sparkles from the sky and spreads life everywhere it lands, and Vittoria prays for her soul to find peace. Naofumi awakens in a dungeon and sees Rishia by his side, but they have no idea where they are. He realizes that all their levels have been reset to 1 as it's revealed that Raphtalia has turned into a prison sentence. They leave their cell where Raphtalia is having a hard time adjusting to her younger body, but promises Naofumi that she can still be his sword. They see a door that leads to the outside and find themselves on a beautiful beach. Raphtalia sees that the water is a no-no zone, so they choose to travel inside the forest instead. While walking, our party encounters the Soul Snatcher, and Naofumi blocks its attack so Raphtalia can penetrate it with her sword. They realize that this gives them XP and begins massacring all the friendly animals that live in this new land. Our party discovers a pond that has clean water but finds that there was a Twitch mod hiding inside. The Kappa blows off Raphtalia against a tree and goes to finish the job, so Naofumi steps in to block all its attack. Raphtalia gets up to divide the monster, but its head game is too strong. They begin gangbanging the fugly creature relentlessly until it decides to taste the prison charge, but it gets bondaged and becomes a rain of Kool-Aid. Kizuna scolds them for leaving the room and reveals that she is the hunting hero, but Naofumi reveals that he's the shield hero, which confuses both of them. They return to the base and explain to her the story of how they came to this world. Kizuna tells them that she was trapped here by an enemy nation, but Naofumi questions how Glass fought against the waves without one of the heroes. Upon hearing her name, Kizuna begins freaking out because she's Glass's best friend. Naofumi says he can't trust her because Glass is their enemy, so she takes out her penetrator and deep throats him, but he took no damage from the attack. Kizuna reveals that her weapons can't harm humans, so she's unable to hurt them. She decides to eat, so Naofumi takes the chance to show why he's the king of cooking. Everyone begins feeding their face with delicious food, then Naofumi decides to leave. Kizuna says that this place is a labyrinth that she has been trapped in for years. They go outside, where she explains that she has been here for so long that she almost self-destructed. But she decided to keep going so she can meet Glass again. Kizuna carries our party to a place she found on the very edge of the labyrinth. Naofumi tries to pass through, but it repels him from entering, and he realizes that it's a bug within the level design. Naofumi asks Kizuna to make a cursed seed for him and takes it to throw inside the room to make the vines grow large enough to expand the glitch they found. The labyrinth begins to collapse and pulls Naofumi's party down, and Kizuna takes the chance to follow them into the hole that they created. Upon escaping the labyrinth, Kizuna is overjoyed to be free and thanks them for allowing her to escape the years of suffering she endured. She makes a grapple to the wall so our party can climb over the shrine and leaves before the guards are alerted. Naofumi wants to go and find Philo, but she is very far away, so Kizuna tells them that the best way to escape this land is to go towards the capital of this hostile country and use the Dragon Hourglass to teleport to a friendly nation. Our party enters a city and finds that there are many different races that didn't exist in their old world. They decide to go get something to eat, and Kizuna brings to their attention that they're broke AF. Naofumi shows her a potion that Lark used to power up Glass, but it's revealed that it doesn't exist in this world, so they decide to sell it. The next day, our party begins giving away samples of the product to get the public's attention, and after it's sold out, they reveal that tomorrow they'll come back to sell more. The next day, our party auctions off the items and sells them at an increased price. Rishia goes to give out the product, but Kizuna trips her to break all the potions. And conveniently, Raphtalia finds that one of them wasn't broken, so they start over the bid to scam all their customers. They use the money to get some new drip for the party, then buy a travel pass to get inside the capital of this nation. At the shrine holding the Dragon Hourglass, they see that it's under strict guard. Our party hears rumors that someone found out how to use the Dragon Hourglass without being a hero, and they see Kazaki exiting the shrine along with many followers who derides him while he walks away. It begins snowing, so they decide to find an inn before it gets too cold. Inside the room, Kizuna tells them that they have 6 days before the wave hits, and in that time they must find Philo, then defeat the book hero. So Raphtalia tells them that they should go use the hourglass now while the storm is masking their movements. Our party goes out into the blizzard and grapples over the walls of the shrine. They run until they arrive inside the building holding the hourglass. But when Kizuna opens the door, they find out that it was a trap, and all the guards begin to surround them. Raphtalia goes to clear a path for our party while Kizuna defends the other side by burying the innocent guards alive so they'll never see their families again. They hide under a bridge and decides to split up to cover more ground and look for the hourglass. Naofumi enters a room and finds another dead end, but the guards begins to corner him. He blows them off while Raphtalia manages to cut through the wall. They go inside and finds the Dragon Hourglass being protected by Kazaki. They surround them with more guards and reveals that he works with the book hero who told him to dispose of Naofumi and his party. He blocks their attacks while Kazuna enters in style and runs towards the hourglass. Our party pushes the villains out the way and runs close to Kazuna so she can activate the dragon hourglass to transport them away to safety. But Raphtalia stops glowing and they begin hearing the book hero's voice. He tells them that he'll be using Raphtalia as an experiment and Kazaki tries to attack them. But Raphtalia blocks his way and bids Naofumi farewell before she charges at the army while he teleports away. Naofumi begs Kazuna to send him back, but the book hero locked that location. The rage begins returning to him when two friendly soldiers come over to greet Kazuna on returning to their nation. They go to the royal castle where she tells everyone what happened to her and reveals that Naofumi is also a cardinal hero, but he came from another world. They immediately back away and accuses Naofumi of trying to destroy their world, which feeds his rage even more. Seeing that they already made up their minds about him, Naofumi walks away from them but encounters Ethnabolt floating in the hallway. He gives Kazuna a paper that summons the Shinigami that was made between her and Glass, then reveals that it can find the location of its creators. Kazuna tells Naofumi to make a familiar between himself and Raphtalia, but he needs something from her to summon it. Naofumi weirdly carries Raphtalia's hair in his shield and they begin the ritual with a drop of his blood to successfully create a Shinigami that's bonded to both Raphtalia and Naofumi. He asks Ethnabolt if he's a human, so he transforms into an Easter bunny that has protected his world for centuries. Kazuna explains that he's the boat vassal and can transport them anywhere, so they go outside where Ethnabolt summons his ship to give them a ride. The Shinigamis reveals that Glass and Raphtalia are close to each other inside another hostile nation. Ethnabolt teleports them to a forest outside the town so they can walk inside the village while keeping the identities a secret. Naofumi suddenly hears a voice in the distance and runs off while checking for Philo's status. He finds a crowd of people at her location and sees Philo begging for someone to rescue her. Naofumi activates Rage Shield, but Rishia convinces him to wait until nightfall so they won't draw unnecessary attention. In the night, they sneak into the circus and go inside to find many caged birds. Naofumi finds Philo, but she's in a small bird form and is unable to transform because of the talismans. He uses the monster's crest to break the seal while Kazuna cuts open the cage to return Philo to Naofumi's arms. The door suddenly opens as the owner comes inside and accuses them of being thieves. So Naofumi puts him under a genjutsu to scare the crap out of him and breaks his mind. The next day, our party walks through the town and finds that they've put out wanted posters of them, but the room was too dark to get a clear image. Naofumi suddenly begins freaking out because Raphtalia's stats have all disappeared, but she couldn't have passed because Raffi is still alive. We go over to Raphtalia and finds that a guard is leading her to a jail cell that immediately drains all her powers. She turns around and realizes that Lark's party is also stuck inside the cell with her. They reveal that they woke up inside the cell after jumping into the portal, and Raphtalia tells them about the labyrinth. Hearing that Kazuna was rescued by Naofumi, Glass promises to repay the debt they now owe them, but she seems to be very ill. Lark explains that the magic of this prison drains the captive's energy while the talismans that the guards carry boost their strength. But spirits like Glass are affected much more because it drains her life points instead of power. 100 IQ Raphtalia comes up with a plan and makes everyone inside the cell invisible so the guards comes to check where they went. While he's distracted, she steals his talisman and gives it to Glass. She blows a hole in the wall and they begin running into the forest to escape the prison that they were trapped in. They begin traveling through a town while masking their identities, but our party finds that they're too broke to buy anything. Therese reveals that her stress relievers are pocket dimensions and enters a shop so they can get Raphtalia a new sword. They take her to get some food to stuff into the endless void we call her mouth. Then ends off the day by tormenting the animals and finds that she's beginning to grow out of being 5 to 25 years in prison. The next day, our party sees a crowd where the dragon hourglass is held and finds that the katana vassal weapon will be choosing a wielder today. They decide to look who will be chosen to carry the most legendary and holy weapon of this nation. Kazaki arrives at the shrine and steps inside to attempt to draw the weapon, but it suddenly begins to glow and teleport itself into Raphtalia's arm. Her servant crest begins to fade away while Kazaki orders her to drop the weapon, but it's stuck to her body. They decide to run away, but Raphtalia leaves them behind so all the guards will chase her alone instead. She runs from her pursuers and hides behind a building but finds that the katana is changing her body to make her legal again. The guards find where she's hiding, so Raphtalia continues to do the race and embraces the ground. She begins thinking about Naofumi and gets back up to climb a staircase but hears that the guards are closing in. She hugs the floor once more and sees that a shrine is ahead of her. Raphtalia gets back up to see a woman who realizes that she's the katana hero and takes her inside. She takes off her clothes to give our waifu some new drip to go with her hero status. They hear that the guards have arrived, so Raphtalia thanks the lady and steps outside the shrine to face them. Kazaki confronts her, but Raphtalia says that she'll spare him if he leaves. The fool draws his weapon and threatens our queen with equal rights, so she gives him one more warning. Kazaki charges at Raphtalia and she easily defeats him with a single strike, but the attack took away his magic instead of damaging him. Two white tigers comes up the stairs to protect Kazaki, but the hairy puss stands no chance against the best girl. Kazaki stands back up to attack Raphtalia again, so she hits him with the fadeaway slash and warns that if he moves he will become past tense. Raphtalia walks away from the battlefield and realizes that she's out of power. A giant puss begins walking towards her, so she accepts that this is where she'll fall. But Naofumi suddenly arrives to block its attack, so Kazuna can follow it up by dividing the tiger by two. Raphtalia thanks everyone for coming to her rescue and embraces Naofumi while telling him that she has returned home. We find Kazaki being healed by the D Riders, but the book hero comes to scold him for failing at everything he tried to do. The idiot starts moving and earns an invitation to heaven, while Yamogi joins the book hero's side and tells him that she'll take down everyone who stands in his way. Ethnabolt takes everyone to a friendly nation and thanks Naofumi for all his help. Kazuna asks them what happened in Naofumi's land, and after they explain, she begins to scold them for trying to dispose of him to save their world. Lark is called by a butler and it's revealed that he's the king of this nation. Kazuna asks Naofumi to help her look for another way to save both their worlds, and he agrees that after defeating the book hero they can work together. They go into the city and head to the equipment shop to ask for a holder for Raphtalia's katana. They suddenly hear an explosion outside and finds that Yamogi has come to challenge them on behalf of the book hero. She scolds them for trying to gangbang her but accepts the fight anyway. The battle starts off with Philo giving everyone a buff and Rishia goes to clash with her. Then Kazuna comes in to cut her but does no damage. Raphtalia joins the fight and they both get pushed back, so Yamogi targets Naofumi but he blocks her attack while her sword comes alive. Lark arrives on the battlefield and they join together to overwhelm her, forcing Yamogi to retreat on the roof where her sword starts glowing. Kazuna tells her to toss it but she refuses because it was a gift from the book hero. Therese buffs Lark's scythe, so he uses attack to disarm her, but the sword reattaches to Yamogi and begins to snatch her soul. Kazuna uses her rod to free her from its grasp while Naofumi knocks it towards glass so she can blow the sword away before it becomes fireworks. Yamogi begins scolding them for trying to prevent the book hero from stopping the wave. They take her prisoner because Kazuna wants to question her about the book hero's plan, but Naofumi reminds them that thousands of people became a hashtag from his actions. She still wants to find out what Yamogi knows, so everyone leaves Kazuna with the prisoner alone and she immediately releases her. Kazuna tells her to have a seat so they can have tea, and Yamogi reveals that she is the book hero's childhood friend. But while he studied, she decided to become his bodyguard. She begins questioning what he did to make Naofumi hate him and says that if the book hero went too far for his goals, he must be punished. However, she will face judgment alongside him. The next day, our party goes to the shopkeeper to get some new drip to increase their stats. Ethnabolt arrives to carry them to fight the book hero, but Kazuna notices that the wave countdown suddenly ended as it manifests in the sky. Lark's party gets teleported to the wave center where Yamogi sees the book hero's lab in the distance and realizes that he was never trying to stop the waves but summon one for himself. It's revealed that in the past the book hero was a Twitch mod that spends his whole life online. Until one day he tested fall damage but woke up in this new world and decided that he will see all that it has to offer by creating calamities. Naofumi is confused about the wave's arrival, but Ethnabolt comes to pick them up so they can defeat the book hero. Yamogi explains that the book hero used the power from the spirit tortoise to summon a wave. So Naofumi goes to give her some equal rights, but Yomogi says that he told her he would stop the waves from coming and repents by showing them where he's hiding. Naofumi arrives at the hideout and goes inside to find Kazaki D riders waiting to fight against them. They attack the party, so our queen banishes them to the Shadow Realm. But Naofumi realizes that the spear is glowing and begins spamming shields to protect everyone from the giant explosion. The book hero arrives on the battlefield to face off against our party, but he carries a revived Kazaki with him. Yomogi explains that the former Kazaki is gone, but the book hero forced the mirror hero's soul into his body to create a zombie that can wield the mirror vassal weapon. Kazaki's D rider cries from seeing him like this, but the book hero laughs and leaves them behind to fight his monster. The best girl wants to smoke him twice and challenges him to a fight, while Naofumi with Rishia goes on ahead. They enter the boss room and finds the book hero waiting for him with the remainder of the spirit tortoise's power. Upon seeing him, Naofumi summons his black force energy because he remembers everything that the book hero did to his world and begins losing himself in his anger. He uses his rage skill to fuse with the black force energy to go full demon time, but Rishia goes over to help and gets a neck massage instead. Naofumi tells her that she's a useless thought that just wants to hop on the bow hero's D and decides to make her his first victim. However, Rishia thanks him for telling her the truth, but reminds him that right now Philo and Raphtalia are fighting for their lives because they believe that he can defeat the book hero and rid the world of his evil. Naofumi releases her from his embrace, so the book hero decides to start attacking, but she blocks his attempts and puts her sword at his breather. He begins using gravity magic to hold them down and knocks her away. Meanwhile, Naofumi is fighting against the rage that's trying to consume him. He gives in to the power, but Ost takes his hand and tells him that he doesn't need to give in to his anger to become stronger. Naofumi awakens with his harem by his side and becomes a magical girl to aim at the book hero. But he activates his devil trigger to fly up and fires a beam to cause a ki blast power struggle. Naofumi sees that his energy is running low, but he still has the power of friendship on his side. The book hero notices that the mirror vassal weapon along with the spirit of Ost is helping Naofumi to defeat him, and with everything against him he gets consumed by the blast, but laughs while he becomes past tense. After the fight, Ost's spirit is finally avenged and Yomogi thanks them for defeating the book hero. They see that Ethnabolt has arrived at the hideout and tells everyone what happened. Our main party begins to be teleported back to their world, so they say their goodbyes to each other. And Kazuna thanks them for all they've done but says that she'll visit him one day. They return to their world and begins traveling to the place where the spirit tortoise fell to drop flowers for their fallen friend and begins praying for her spirit to find peace. They set off to continue their journey, but Naofumi turns back to see Ost wishing him farewell.
Like for a cat girl, subscribe for a waifu, and remember to stay swifty.
Ew.